All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for this live stream. I'm going to get back to contributing to simplytest.me as we move forward to getting the new version launched. If you aren't familiar with Simply Test Me, it is a Drupal site that lets you test Drupal sites. It was started way, way back, and you type in a project name and it launches a sandbox for you to be able to, test out different Drupal projects. It's pretty integral in the community. A lot of folks use it for testing patches. It lets people test some things without setting up a local environment. Before we begin, I want to give a quick roundabout shout out to some of the sponsors for the project. And I had to restart PHP Storm due to some updates, so I'll get this reopened. I want to say thank you to Tugboat, who's one of our service providers. They provide in-kind sponsorship for the backend environments of our previews. So when you launch a project, it's actually a Tugboat environment that's being run. So Tugboat is the fastest platform to automate the creation of preview and test environments. I use them for my clients as well, and it's really, really great. I also want to bring up Amaze.io, who is the new hosting provider for simplytest.me. And when I say new, I mean for the new version of the site. It's still currently hosted on the existing infrastructure, but when we launch this new version of simplytest.me that is on D9 and React, it will be hosted on Amaze.io's Lagoon managed cloud hosting infrastructure. I want to give a shout out to Centauro, the monthly contributor to the project, and also to Maloon and Druid, who are currently hosting and supporting the existing infrastructure and maintenance. Like I said, that Tugboat is the one who powers all the sandbox previews now. Before it was on these servers that Maloon and Druid hosted throughout the years. So major thanks to them. If you'd like to sponsor the project and help contribute to its development, it is an open collective, which I'd like to give a quick highlight and shout to all the folks who have been contributing every month, and to the organizations. Midcamp donated $2,000 towards development, which is pretty amazing. As a little side note, like all of my, I have previously received money through the Open Collective for the development of the features. But all of my time on these live streams are an in-kind donation through my company, Bluehorn Digital. So I don't actually charge for any of the work on simplytest.me here, only when I just basically don't have free time and I know we need to push things forward, which I haven't done that in a while. But I do make sure to get these live stream in to get development and just let people see the updates that are going on. So that bit of housekeeping is done. We're going to dive into some issue triage. Actually, I realized I went through all 8.x, 4.x issues and realized that we just had some items that were open, and I want to clean them up first. For example, like semantic version modules not testable as main projects. This I'm actually going to close out because we fixed it in 4.x. So I need to figure out where we fixed that actually. So that way I can close these properly, not in modules contrib. So about 2 weeks ago, I think it's 2 weeks ago, my time's all messed up because with Easter at the beginning of the month, on top of like invoicing, holiday, new month, DrupalCon, I've kind of like lost track of time. I don't know if anybody else is in that same boat. But last month, sometime towards the end of the month, we did add support for semantic versioning in contrib projects. It will let you select, like webform 6.0.0 and then figure out what version of Drupal core is available. Before I close this, let's actually make sure. So I'm going to do a ddev start. I want to make sure I'm not off base, but it should be all working there. Let's just wait for ddev to launch this. All right, let's go to simplytest.me.ddev. right in there. I know we save. It should. So for those who weren't on part of the live stream, Simply Test Me will now have a local cache of Drupal core releases, and we save the major, the minor version, the patch, and then we also save all the releases for our project, the short name, its version, its tag, and its core compatibility. And we pass that core compatibility to the Stemver package from Composer to get the list of compatible releases. And that's done in this project version manager. Get all releases, compatible releases. So it will load all the releases for a project and then filter them out, because there's no way to really filter them out in the MySQL database, or like as far as I know, there's no way to do like to get semantic versioning logic into your SQL query. So we load all the releases and then we filter them out and return it. So everything should work, but I would like to just test things. Oh, here's one thing too. QED42 has been working on the new theme. So major shout out to them. I'm going to make a note to add them to my little sponsor notes. Let me do that. And put a... There, I made a little note for myself. So I'll put that there. So let's see if my local environment has data. Apparently I had to do a reinstall, so I'm not getting anything back. But let's see if 500 error, that's always a good one. Cannot determine project short name on project version manager update data web form. Now if I type in web form, we have web form there. So I got some bugs, and that's going to be part of what goes on today, is sorting out a lot of those bugs, so we can get to the cleanup. So like we don't have our Drupal core versions. So if I do ddev drush, hey, thanks for tuning in. So if I do ddev drush, it's going to eventually show me the commands, but I'm going to just look it up here. So we got simply test project core versions update. And if I type in 9, it's going to go fetch all the Drupal 9 versions. One thing I want to add is a cron for that. So I'm actually going to go back to drupal.org quick and create that issue. So create a new issue. And I'm going to run 8. Add cron to fetch Drupal core releases on a regular basis. I guess we don't really need that because there's only core releases every so often. So I'm just going to avoid that for now. We'll think of a better way to handle it. So how about actually I create an issue for provide a user interface way to fetch Drupal core versions. We'll do that. We're going to create a feature request, take it for the branch, add the code, and we'll say right now you can fetch Drupal core release versions. Yeah, the search, I'm going to open another bug for that too. So the search is case insensitive, except when it's a miss. When the project doesn't exist, it tries to fetch it. So we need to do a string lower when trying to import the project dynamically on search. So I'm going to open another issue for that as well. Right now you can via drush as that code. Core releases are not often, so we don't need a cron job, but maybe a UI so someone doesn't need to access the CLI of the server. All right, that can be triaged, but at least it's captured, and I'll open a new issue. So Adam, what happened is on the controller simply test projects, with this autocomplete, if it doesn't find a match, it does fetch project, and the short name tries to find it via the drupal.org API, and basically we need to do we need to run string to lower on the short name. That's why it errored, because there is no web form, but there is web form. That's what happened. So I'm going to open an issue for that, and that can be something we fix up too in here. So what's that? What was that route called? Autocomplete dynamic project import fails on case sensitivity. I think that sounds good. We create that task. If I get the error, oh, that's weird. Like, why did it happen? Oh, it's not even in there. It was in this hook. For always ensuring that the release name. Oh, so it wasn't even there. So it saved it as, so returned. If we were to go here, and I love how I was like, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to verify one thing. And now we're down the rabbit hole. But if I go here and type in web form, the drupal.org API comes back correctly. But if we went to updates.drupal.org, release history, and we went to web form, not word form, web form, this is case sensitive. So let's make sure, ensure project short names are always lowercase. There. So that's what happened, is it saved it with the capital W for the short name. And that is fine when you fetch it over the web API, but the releases aren't, like, it doesn't exist. During the last live stream, I typed in web form for search. The auto import on local cache added the project. However, it saved the short name as web form, which I typed in. This caused fetching versions to crash. Not fetching, we'll type fetching short name. By the way, I subscribe to Grammarly, so that's what that little like pop-up is definitely one of my more favorite tools. So what we'll do now is we'll say see that. We get a result, and the short name ends up saved that way. However, oh, by the way, so like the tabs thing, if you do Command 9 and like Chrome and everything else, it takes you to the last tab. So that's bounced around to like the very last one. If you visit the release, the updates release channel, it has an error. All right. So one quick way to, we have releases now. Nope, not docs. Code, we'll leave this as something that needs to be fixed. I'm gonna leave it open. So at least we report it. But now if I refresh this page, we imported the core releases. So I should be able to do web form. Great. We now see the core versions, which 6.0 is only supported by Drupal 9. I guess the 5.x branch got removed, or is it just, yeah, the sorting here needs to get updated. I have to-dos for that. So if we go to 8.x 5.0, we receive this here. Let's click the 6.0 and click launch. I sincerely hope that didn't cause an error. Great, we're going to the preview. I'm going to go ahead and close this. issue because we have it. Like we were able to fetch it and see it. So I'm going to tag that to whatever issue we added the project version manager in. I'm just going to say closed, fixed, or it was fixed by this. So we'll annotate it. Oh, March 30th. Okay. So that was it. So let's say, I guess we'll do it as close outdated. There was no actual work here. Because when you put it as close any of these, there's no issue credits issued, but there wasn't really much work done here. So we'll do close outdated. Adam, you have the ability to override this later on if you wish. This was resolved in closing. It's not on the live set, the live site. I can't type today, live site yet, but it will be for the new version we are working to quickly release. So I'll hit save. And let's go back here. Command required. I put it. Oh, we got a typo in the D9. Do close outdated. I'm going to create a new issue. So to go back, sorry, I'm going a little bit fast because I really want to try to get a lot done here, but I also want to make sure folks know what happens. So one of my last work made sure that whenever there was an error, we took like the last few lines and dropped it into here to make it easier to file issue reports. Because a lot of times people are like, the build didn't work. And it's like, well, why? It's like, well, don't know why. So right here it says command required is not defined. Suppose I got a typo. In Drupal 9 with PHP unit, you need to also install the PHP spec prophecy PHP unit library. And I made a good old typo right here of composer required. So let's create a new issue. We'll call it Drupal 9 build failure. Command required not defined. This is a bug report for 8.x, 4.x code. One thing that would be good too is I know in projects you can actually customize this issue template or the default one. It'd be great if somebody could help us draft what's more appropriate for Simply Test Me. Like problem motivation, steps to reproduce are good ones. I don't think we need like proposed resolution or any of these, but something that removes some of this boilerplate would be good. I believe the Centauro team updated the commerce one to make it a little bit more friendly. I just want to see, just show that off if it's possible to quickly. So if we go to create new issue, they've customized that default body text. So that way it's more appropriate. Oh, so here, they just did describe your bug, and if a bug, describe steps. So that'd be a good thing for us to do with the project is to improve this default. So the problem motivation, I made a typo in the Drupal 9 tugboat build config. I added composer required when the command is composer require. Launch a D9 project and it fails on this. All right. So one of the cool things about some new features on Drupal.org are the issue forks. So right now, let's say I'm investigating a few things. My local branch is dirty because I'm doing something else. I can click the issue fork button and it's going to create the issue fork. I'm going to quick pre-open the merge request. And now I'm going to go open this branch in GitLab. And then I'm going to click on the web IDE. So now I can just make the edits inside of GitLab without having to change my local and my current context. Although, as you can see, I'm jumping all over the place as it is. So if I were to go to modules and it's inside the tugboat and source preview config generator is where that the config we send the tugboat gets built here. and that's what the error is. So if I were to search for required, look at there. I made a good old typo. So now I can just click commit and, it's like fix, substitute required with required. I want to start a new merge request because one exists. I'm just going to click commit. Be interesting if we could get that checkbox disabled by default. So now if I go back here and I refresh the page, you'll see that it said I opened the merge request, created a commit, and I'm just going to go to that merge request real quick. Changes. Yep. I'm going to go ahead and put this as needs review and click save. All right. The good news is that I was able to select the project and build it. I don't know if there's errors in requiring it. We won't know that for some time until that patch is merged. But we were able to at least say that one issue. We were able to triage that issue and close it up. So now I'm going to go to my next one. Validate Drupal version is a valid Drupal version in the launcher payload. So this needs to be triaged up. So what this relates to is inside of our launch, in our type data, we have this instance launch definition. And this ties into Drupal's type data API, and we could add constraints. So what we need to do is create a new constraint that ties into the core version manager and ensures that we actually have it in a local database. So I'm going to mark this as active and triage it up. So we should have a server-side constraint validation here. I'm going to delete that because it landed. Actually, no, I'll leave that there, and I'm going to delete the steps to reproduce and just provide the proposed resolution. Create a new symphony constraint called, what do we name the other ones? Validation, we'll say core version constraint. Or we'll say core version valid, because naming things is the biggest bike shed operation in the world. This should check that this will be applied to the Drupal version property in this class. I'm doing Shift Option Command C, which is the same as right click, copy paste special copy reference. That gives you the fully qualified class name. So the property in there, this will invoke the core version manager to validate that the core version exists in our local database, verifying it's a legit core version. So what we'll be able to do then is whenever we submit a launch, like we just did when we said launch sandbox, it converts the array to a type data object and then runs validate. So all the Symfony validation constraints are executed, and if there's any errors, we report them back to the front end. So this just ensures that the Drupal version, it's not just blank, it is a string, but it's also a valid Drupal version. And we could eventually add one that says that the core version is valid for the project that's provided. But we don't need to get that far in depth yet. Just something that says it's a valid version. So I'm going to save that and consider it triaged. We can go back to it at a later date, or somebody can help contribute to that. Add a constraint for project short main to validate the project exists. I guess that's validated enough for now. I don't really want to work on it in this moment. I guess one thing we could do is maybe say that add a this specifies for that definition, because when I reread that, I thought it was for the actual project entity. Although maybe it is. Maybe I'm wrong. Entity. Let's go to simply test project. We'll go to the fields. We got title, short name. There's actually no constraints added to this, which we could do here, but we'll save that for later. So allow importing an individual project. I do want to work on this. Right now, the workaround, as you saw earlier, was that there's no way to get back to the main website from an error here. That the only way to import projects is there is like an import form that does everything, or this autocomplete. And I want to build a drush command to just one-off import separate projects. So I'm going to leave that open. Add a constraint for version to verify it's a valid project version. This added stuff to info.yaml, which is not what we're looking for. So I need to triage this as well. So what this relates to is again, I wrote the issue bad. I didn't explain it was for this type data. So we're going to say add a constraint to project info definition for version to verify it's a valid project version. What I mean here is inside this project info definition, there is a version value. And this is when we picked web form. When we picked web form in the UI, the title here was web form. The short name was web form as lowercase. And then I wonder if we can expand that to the regular expression. But here, this version, like we want this version to tap into the project version manager to make sure that it's a valid version. So let's triage it with the proposed resolution. So add a new Symphony constraint that reads the version property in project info definition. This calls the project version manager to make sure there is a valid record that we fetched from. All right. We'll close that. That's good enough. Drupal 9 build needs to support dev release compatibility. I'm going to just bring this over here. Oh, I closed that other issue. So one thing that changed with, if you don't know this, inside of the Drupal project release and recommended project, they changed the minimum stability. So before it said minimum stability dev. So you could do like, composer require 1.x-dev, but in the 9.x lifecycle, I believe. No. Somewhere it changed. I swear. All right, maybe it didn't. Oh. Wait. Drupal composer minimum stability. Maybe I read the change record wrong, and this isn't an issue. So Drupal project templates no longer use minimum stability dev. In Drupal 8 through 9, Drupal composer projects declared their minimum stability as this. Right? That's what I see here. Therefore, as of Drupal 9.1.alpha, they declare minimum stability, matching the stability of the Drupal version. Okay. So of course, this dev release says that. So if we go to the releases, if we looked at 9.1.6 and browse the source code, minimum stability is stable. Okay, I'm not losing my mind. Great. So if somebody tested Drupal 9.1.6 but web form dev, it actually wouldn't install because it requires a minimum stability of a stable release, not alpha, not beta, not RC, and definitely not dev. So we want to update the composer build to set that. And I've done that in a few places in my testing. And one area I've been working on is this GitHub action for installing Drupal. And I even have it set in here where one of the config options is you run composer config minimum stability dev, prefer stable true, preferred install is the distribution instead of like an archive instead of the git repo. So I think that's a quick fix, and we'll work on that quickly. Instead of just like you know what? Let me finish triaging and then we'll go through here. So the required tasks are to run the following composer commands. So we need composer config, and it is minimum stability dev. Maybe I have these in PHP Sand Drupal, I believe. Maybe it'd be easier to copy from there. So yep, so I already have it in here. It's going to copy those. So we just need to run that in the Drupal 9 process. The reason why I'm not working on it now is we also have that other pending Drupal 9 patch fix, and there are tests that we can get that run that verify the output. So, and Drupal.org does not run tests for distributions. I don't know if we can ask for that to be changed, but that's a historical thing. Maybe it's something that can be added. Okay. So allow importing individual project. Said we can work on that. Fixed distribution and profile support. Right now, profiles don't work, and I found out why they don't. And because the code is never downloaded. So I'd like to work on a fix for that too. Release compatibility with additional projects. So right now, any project can be added as an additional project. We need a filter based on the version of Drupal core being selected, or we need a project, and after selected, state that there's no compatible releases. Now, I think this is actually fixed, but we don't exactly have tests for it. So if I go to the React app quick, into this wonderful mess I've created, I say that just because it was a lot of quick fixes. So compatible releases, we allow you to search for a project, but if there's a core restraint applied, we then filter on it. So let's go back to the main Simply Test website. And actually, real quick, because I know I'll forget, let's create an issue that we can't go back at all. So on error cannot, on build error, user cannot go back to the main page. We'll just say page. Bug report, that branch, we'll call it user interface. While testing, I had a failed build, and I had no way to go back to the launch form to try again. Side note, let's open a follow-up to add messaging on what to do if there is an error. That should be a follow-up issue that we can open. So let's copy this screenshot, upload it there. So yeah, that's one thing I do for my Mac setup. When I take a screenshot, it goes to my screenshots folder, which I don't know why I put it on my desktop, but I did. But I drag it as a shortcut into my dock, and because then I can just drag it over really easy. into my uploads. Before the issue forks, I had my patches directory here too. So every time I wrote a Drupal patch, I put it in there and I could just drag it in. But I haven't had to write it. I did that folder finally about like 4 months ago, because I had like 10 megabytes of patches, and I haven't had to write a single patch since, now that we have issue forks. All right, so let's save that. All right, perfect. So let's go back to the main site and test something out. So we know if we type in what's a web form module? Web form address one. Shoot. It just takes so long to import all the projects. So this task is around this extra projects item. If I go to drupal.org project web form, oh, he deployed the new update. Awesome. It's got a new front end, or not, project page. So what I'm looking for now is drupal.org added a under resources, there's projects that extend this, which there's a lot, more than I expected. Sure, we'll say Gatsby web form backend. How about that? Let's copy this in. So if I search, let's React web form backend. Okay, well, that's not what I expected it to be called. So let's do Gatsby web form backend. Releases. So it has a release. Now the main thing we need to check here is this issue we're looking on is compatibility. So this needs to be compatible with Drupal 9, which it is, and Webform 5 or 6. So this is compatible with Webform 5 or 6 and Drupal 9, and we got the releases. So I guess we should try to find something else which may not have compatible releases to test this. It kills me having to manually test this. It should be all done with tests, but you know, we're doing what we can for right now. Let's see if this is compatible with Webform 6. Hopefully it's not. It says 8.9, and there's no composer.json. Wait, HubSpot.info, dependencies web form. Let's see. We'll type in HubSpot. So let's remove this project. We'll add an additional, and we'll say HubSpot. You know, I guess it does have a composer.json that's specifying specific versions. So it's working. I guess there's there's not much of a good way to test it. So maybe I should just say, I'm going to close it and say that we fixed it here. This should be fixed, and we filter out the additional project releases based on the core constraint. I want to try one more. So we're going to do password policy. I think because that's supposed to be a release. There's password policy pwned, but it's not coming back. Because maybe it's the full name of it. So let's find projects that extend this. I copy that name again. Oh, E. Yep. So let's change this to be password policy. We got the advanced options. Now, password policy. Oh, this is great actually. So password policy has a 7x release and an 8. Have I been pwned integration only has a Drupal 8 release. So now if we type in additional project, run 7.x, if I do password policy, have I been pwned, we have no releases available. Now there's the whole UX thing here, but if now we go and we choose, 8.x.3.0 and we choose 9.5, I guess that's what we can write a bug for, is it didn't update automatically, but so it is working. It's filtering out, but once you change the versions, it's not really updating. So we'll say that we'll just triage this. So that's fixed, but we're gonna make it about that bug that it, like, the React code didn't automatically update everything. Maybe. No, I'm just gonna close it. So I'm gonna say, closed, outdated. Say this was fixed, and that we filter out the additional project based on the core constraint. I'll open. There's some React state bugs, but we can address those later. Select example. I'll just document the example because I don't think it's like something critical right now because it may not be that often. But if somebody is experimenting with versions, it should automatically populate. So pick password policy 7.x, add password policy pwned, only no releases show for pwned, but modify password policy to 8.x or 9.x compat, no releases updated for password policy. And actually I believe that fix, so the reason, the fix there would be, this should have re-rendered technically because the applied core constraint changed. But we'll dive into that later on. The main thing is I just want to get things closed up, triage, see where we are, and start working on some bugs. Because I've not had any time to triage any of this. Fix the commerce config and umami config. Yes, I'm going to quick fix these because our GitHub repo keeps failing. So we can't run tests on drupal.org for profiles, but the GitHub repo, which serves as like the website, does run the tests. So the idea is that way we would catch the bugs before we deploy them, I guess. Like they would be committed to the profile repo, but not before we deploy them to simplytest.me, the website. So let's run those tests. So modules, where was it? I'm double tapping shift to open this finder, pasting the class name. So unit test here, let's run it and see where it fails. So this helps test the one-click demo for Drupal Commerce is output config. And it's due to the difference there because we removed that, it used to be a hard-coded path and now it is dynamic. So let's find that fix. Why did I lose it? Commands 10. Why am I not able to track this? Oh, because it's right there. It's for the site's default files. Jeez. And the umami demo has the same fix. So what's cool is early on, I got it set up that we have these unit tests to verify the tugboat config that gets built. So we can kind of verify like what is being sent over. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard because we can't really like run it in a fully integrated test environment, because we'd be like building tugboat builds. Like it'd be interesting if there's a way to validate it without fully running it, but it has to like run all these commands in an operating system. So this is the best we can get. So I've got the changes. So let's create an issue fork. So there's two ways you can do it, right? You can do it through the web IDE by creating the issue fork, or locally. So you'll get a taste of both. I like to open the merge request right away because then it adds a comment, which we don't see right now. But every time there's a commit, it will then show things as it goes on. So I'm going to click show commands, and I'm going to copy this first line, which adds and fetches the issue fork as a remote repository. So when if you're not too familiar with Git, Git's a decentralized version control system. And that means when it's decentralized, you can have remotes everywhere or anywhere, and you choose what one is the canonical one, usually origin. But in this example, you can see I've got a bunch of remotes, and they're all different issue forks. And this just adds another one. And then it fetches the data. And then they've got the nice command that says, check out this branch. There we go. To get diff. Those are the changes there. And for some reason, my package.lock has changed because npm has no idea what a lock file actually means, in my opinion, because every time you run npm install, it modifies the lock instead of just installing from the lock. So those look like the changes we need. Let's do a git commit. AV is all in verbose, so that way in your editor, as you're typing out the message, if you want to view the diff, you can. So we'll say fix the test. Super descriptive. One thing is when that command does git checkout and sets up the tracking, so that way you just need to do git push. You don't need to like git push the remote name and then the branch. Like you would like git push origin main or git push origin master. This takes care of it. We pushed it. Let's refresh the issue. And you'll see that now I've got the test there. Put it as needs review. We'll save it. All right. Knocking out little quirks left and right. Not exactly, but this is a quality of life issue I wanted to add, which adds Husky. And Husky lets you define pre-commit hooks. One thing this would let us do is basically on commit pre-compile that, or on commit ensure that the JavaScript and CSS assets are compiled. But I know we're discussing on stopping that, so that way we have less merge conflicts, and actually just compiling when we push to Amazy, which I have set up actually. So in our composer.json, for better or worse, depending on what some people may think, on post install command, we cd into the theme, we run npm install, and then execute composer compile, which composer compile right here CDs into the theme and runs npm build, run build, and that command will build the React app, which uses Laravel mix, and then executes the gulp build. And eventually I want to get this harmonized. The original theming for this setup had gulp. I like to use Laravel mix because it wraps Webpack, and I think Webpack is better than gulp. And Laravel mix means you don't need to fully understand Webpack. You're just like this file, like mix.sas, this source file, put it here, done. There's not much tooling to be done, but it's wrapped around this build command that builds the JavaScript and CSS assets. Eventually we can, I want this to be cleaned up, but for most folks, it doesn't matter because they're just dealing with the front end site and it's all compiled and they don't need to care that this tooling is kind of, out of sorts. So I think we can mark this as, I guess the one problem. Nope, is I guess the one thing, I'm going to put it as postponed. Marking this postponed for a few reasons. Or list. Sorry that I haven't gotten to actually development yet. If that's new out, I can switch to it soon. This, like I said, I wanted to triage some of the issues because, maintaining open source code isn't just writing bugs and, or writing bugs. Yes, writing bugs in the code. But, writing fixes for bugs, it's this part. It's this hard part. This takes time. I've spent, 45 minutes so far just trying to clean up the issue queue. That takes time. It's not just writing code. Yeah. So hopefully now you get to see this part of it, this thrilling side of open source. We now have this, which deploys to Easy and compiles code, compiles front end assets for the main site. We discussed not having the committed compiled artifacts to reduce merge conflicts. We need to decide the contributor flow for simply test. Distribution profiles are hard. So we need to figure out what it looks like. What do we tell people when they want to contribute to Simply Test Me? It's not just, hey, download the project from drupal.org. It is basically like, hey, clone the website and you're working on a repo that's inside of it. So before we even figure out this part of it, I think we have other fish to fry, if you will, before we begin to worry about our contributor workflow. And I think it's safe to say that simplytest.me will have a barrier to development, just because it's not a module. It's a product or service, if you will, and also a Drupal distribution. So there's just always going to be a curve. Projects keep replicating after launching a sandbox. Yeah, I remember this. I had no idea what was happening. Needs investigation. Simply test fetcher fetch project always saves the project. I don't think this is happening anymore, because as you can see when I type in password policy, it's not being duplicated. So I'm going to just close that as cannot reproduce. I can no longer reproduce. This got fixed sometime down the road, possibly during the what was that issue number again with the releases? I'm assuming it got fixed when I added the version manager stuff. Because I made changes to that controller. Yeah. No, that's the command. So the controller, so in here, changes were made. No, I don't even see it there, but I can't reproduce it. So I'm just going to say it was here. Or other issue. All right, so let's hit save. Awesome. Now this is great. This is where we can start closing things. Related issues. I'm just going to say it's fixed. So semantic version research, I appreciate everybody who helped read into this, because it is now landed. Let's give my favorite celebration emoji. This is available in 4.x, added via the following issues. We have it here and here. I'm going to copy that, but I'm pretty sure that there's a duplicate somewhere. So let's mark it fixed. Since I'm not a maintainer, I can't add credit. So maybe I shouldn't close it. I'm just gonna let's read it. Lal did not created the issue but didn't go through. Looks like it was mostly Benji that did the research here. I know some others did, but I'm just gonna check the box and let's see what happens. I don't know. Since I'm not a maintainer, it won't save any of that data. So Adam, you could go through and update that, but it's at least marked as fixed. I'm gonna open my Slack and just paste that into the simplytest.me channel. I hid it so that way you don't see all my Slack workspaces. Tick some boxes and resave to add issue. All right. There. So that's open. Did that. Simple test core cannot be enabled. This is from try enable the simple test module in Drupal core. It fails with lack of PHP unit composer dependencies. There's no way to add them once you have the site. Let's look at this. Automate tests do not run. Okay, so this uses the, this is not. No dev. Okay, so I see here. Let's add a patch the old-fashioned way. That's not the right way. So what this is saying is that we can't install the simple test module, and that's to the fact that there are no dev dependencies installed. But I don't understand how that happened. So let's review the patch. So where's all this here? So commerce, new mommy demo, mommy config test, preview config generator. Oh, because there's all these random, that's right. I copied this verbatim and there was a bunch of like update no dev. So yeah, that's it. We need to basically remove all the no dev. So let's apply Benji's patch. So the way that I always applied patches, oh man, we gotta do this the old way. It's killing me. Let's do git checkout 8.x, 4.x. Do git new branch. So I have NB alias as git checkout branch. So we check out a local branch. I always copy the link address and I do curl, paste it, and then git apply v. because when you curl it, it just it returns it, you know, the text, and then I pipe it to git apply. So we now have this applied, and if we run the tests, wait, why did it remove that? Oh wait, no, that test is just really outdated. Oh, the Drupal 9 config test is just really, really outdated. Whatever, we can just fix it here. So Drupal 9 config test. Oh boy. Run. Let's look at the diff here because it's a lot of changes. So the expected so we removed that because that wasn't, this stuff, this all got updated, and this test just was not updated at all, which is the bummer of why we can't run the tests on drupal.org, because we're writing these tests to try to have best coverage, but then we can't actually test anything. Like, here's that error that I have to commit to the test to verify that it's still broken. All right, where's this going? Drupal dev dependencies. Let's rerun it again and see how far we get. Test config 0. Let's see. Let's read 0. Where's the first one? Oh, same thing. Okay. So we copy these, and we replace these 3 lines, I believe. Let's run it. Yep. All right. So that's passing. Let's just go down the line here. Ba-boom. That. So that is definitely one thing, is the Drupal 9 support is experimental. Okay, tests are passing. And that would be great to get fixed up. I don't remember how to write a patch. Git commit AV. Fix D9. We'll just say that. And then it's git diff 8.x. Okay, there we go. There's the patch. So I've got a tool, drupal.org issue patch. NID argument is different from the NID in the branch name. Well, you know what? Apparently, even my own local tool is broken. So we're just going to do. So now you've seen all the ways to do contribution via GitLab and the web IDE, the issue fork. Yes, I know there's a composer required typo. There's that, it's silly, but I'm preserving it because we have the fix here. So this is going to fix it, and it will cause a conflict. So this fixes it. I want it to be, the fixes to be in their own proper areas. So now I'm going to name this patches, and then we would always take like the patch and then append like the comment number it's supposed to be. Let's see, reroll, which fixes all the D9 tests as well. Looks good to me. I'll just make sure I put a note. Note, it preserves the composer required bug from there. Which, thanks for catching that typo, because you're better than I was whenever I first wrote that. So let's save it. And let's manually test this real quick. All right. I didn't even upload the patch. God. It's been a long time since I've wrote a patch this way. Forgot patch. This flow has been a while. All right. So we've got the patch. Let's go ahead and give this a test. Wait, is it not actually importing core? Column date cannot be inserted. Oh, man. Project versions. Oh, it looks like I may have caused a whole... I really don't want to import everything. All right. We're just going to have to manually test that later. I'm going to skip it. It looks like there might be a bug with testing just core. Drupal core options are repeated. This is outdated. This was fixed when we started caching Drupal core versions locally. Yeah, I fixed it in a separate branch, not in the main branch, so that's why I copied it over, just to keep, you know, everything in its own bucket. So let's go to core version manager, and when did we add this? Maintain a local version, cache core compatibility. Yeah, it was in here. Let's see. Issue. Why don't we add that as a related issue as well? Trick, if you try to like copy in an issue ID and this like autocomplete just takes a while, I usually delete the last number and then add it back, and it seems to be the quick fix. All right, so we close that. Patch cannot be applied. This is possibly a duplicate of... So, unable to spin up a D7 module with patch. I'm just going to skip that for now. This is a feature request to always have verbose error logging. So one thing, like what that issue is proposing is essentially whenever we build a Drupal site, we have this setting. We basically copy. Maybe that's it. We need to essentially just copy this example.settings.local into the main site. So that way this is always turned on, but I guess it also turns off CSS pre-processing. So maybe we just need to run a drush command to set that. So I'm going to just copy in. We can accomplish this by appending the Appending the following to the generated settings.php. But it's probably easier to use drush to set the config. So I believe that would be like drush config set system.logging error level verbose. Note this is D8, D9 only. You need to find the D7 thing. Way. I can't remember the D7 way off the top of my head, but that's how we would do that. One thing I want to do as well is right now we have this really weird workflow where we have the site config in the composer project, which is the repo on GitHub, right? So we have this GitHub repo, and this is where the config lives. That's completely disconnected from the drupal.org profile. And with Drupal core something, 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 I don't know the exact one, you're able to specify that that's not the one that you can install from config and testing site config. How is there no way to do this? There should be a test install profile, but I guess there's not, which is interesting to me. So inside of core install, you can provide a config install path. Or sorry, it's you just name it as install config. And you're able to just install from within the distribution. I'll just open the Contenta. So Contenta does this, which is a headless Drupal CMS or distribution. So yeah, you can flag it as config true, and it will read from the directory you provide it. So we can say inside config sync. So I think this might be one thing that I work on right now. It will help with the site builder or the contribution experience. We can copy that in and sort it out. So I'm going to do that now, where we'll get into here. So what that means is I need to figure out how it reads that path. So I'm going to go back to this install core. So if empty, not empty, install config path. So when does it set this? So sync directory. So sync directory gets settings. So if the install profile has a config sync directory, copy the information. Okay. So we don't need to do anything there. So install state profile info, config install path. So if is directory config sync, it automatically sets it. Okay, so all we have to do, is create this. So let's do the issue fork, because this would be way easier than a patch, because that patch would be absurd. So let's get to issue fork, open the merge request. Let's check back out our 8.x, 4.x branch. We're going to add that remote. We're going to check out that branch. And what I'm going to do is do the make directory, config. Oh, it exists. What's in install optional? Okay, we'll make their config sync. And then basically all these like config, install, and optional will be gone. We won't need them because the entire site will install off of this. So let's move all the config items, all the YAML into config sync. So now we have here, this directory is deprecated as all config exists in the simply test distribution. I'll link to here. See. So I want to make a new branch config in simply test. What's the difference in the lock file? I'm gonna what's the new commands like restore? All right, so I made a new branch for the GitHub repo. Move config into simply test profile. I'm going to do a git push origin config into there. Now I'm going to do a GitHub pull request. I'm going to just see if there's a way to make it a draft out of the box. Draft. Okay. So I'm going to create a draft pull request. I'm going to submit it and say that draft. Oh, I should have just added that to the body. So we'll say draft blocked on there. Okay, so now I have a pull request to remove the config from our GitHub repo. And now if I go to this, I now have this config sync. And the change we have to make to simply test is we have to add that flag at the bottom. So let's go back to Contenta. And they have the config install true, which now we can actually delete all of those lines because it's going to install off of this config. For the record, if you ever try to do this, like starting from scratch, you need to have the site installed first and then export the config. Then you can configure this. This is how I run all of my sites. All of my projects have like a distribution that they install from the site config. But like I said, site config, the like root config, nested inside the distribution. So yeah, so let's do that. And here's how we're going to test it, right? We've got this. It's going to error. Actually, maybe it won't. We got hook install tasks. This might be needed, but this shouldn't be needed as we already have it in this config. So let's look at system.site. Site name is simply test. Front is configure, so we don't need that because it will install. Honestly, this probably isn't needed as well, but we'll just keep it around. So let's get ready to test this. I do have a ddev command I use, which is now, we don't need it. I have this si. Look, now I had it to do here, and I'll delete that line where I was telling Drush to install from existing config, but we don't need that anymore. And then in sites default settings.local, this is our Lagoon local. We have an all.settings. I think we can then comment that out. So I'm going to comment that out because we're not going to use this root config directory anymore. It's all going to be based in the profile. So now The next step is to run that ddev si. Let's see what happens if we get a clean install. This will definitely make contributions a lot easier, because if somebody makes configuration changes to the project, it lives in the distribution. I wish I would have done this a little bit earlier for QED 42 when they started theming. The configuration synchronization failed. The import is empty, and if applied, would delete all of your configuration. Well, that's not expected. Let's see here. Profiles, contrib. Let's make sure all this is right. Should be distribution name. Yeah, that's the bare minimum you need. Ddev SQL drop. Oh, configuration failed. The import is empty, and if applied, would delete all of your configuration, so it has been rejected. All right, so I'm going to turn on Xdebug, and I've never done it this way, where the configuration is inside of the profile. So I'm going to put on Xdebug and do what I know best and just debug it to figure out what's going on. So install load profile in here, right? This is where the magic happens. Where it says the install config path. So let's figure out why it's not finding our install config. Oh, okay, I did turn on the phone. All right, so we are loading the install profile, static cache. Okay, we've already got the cache. Let's just see. Simply test, English, distribution, the name, install, themes, config path, right? Profiles. Let's copy this value. And if we cd into web, we do ls there, we've got a bunch of config. All right, so I don't know what the problem's going on. Sync directory, sites default sync, if not empty. This overrides the, else if. I just stepped over this without realizing I should have inspected it a little bit more. So install state config install path is profiles contrib simply test me config sync. All right. The sync is off that file storage, sync read, file cache, cached. Let's read this file. Data is null. Oh. Why? Oh, this is the file cache. Sorry. Data here. Okay. So we've got the data. Install paths parameter lane code, or if is not empty, and install state. So use language from the profile configuration if available. Okay, let's. So that's really weird. The site configuration, messenger, assert text. Oh, here we go. So catch the error is there and here. All right, we've got 2 errors. Let's figure out where it's erroring out. Okay, so it errored out right here. Exception. There were errors validating the oh, it's just literally that thing it displayed. Config importer can validate. So let's go to config importer. There's a validate method. Right? So that's, yeah, config importer 532. Let's look at 532. Calls validate. All right, I'm going to stop and we're going to refresh and see why that errored out. Let's see. I don't understand. Maybe I'm just going to have to skip this for now. The import is empty, and if applied, would delete all your configuration, so it's been applied. I'm going to try something real quick as well. So we have this install directory that we don't need and optional. And I wonder if that's causing conflicts. So I'm going to refresh it. So I guess that's one thing, current extensions, and then the current. So current extensions are here, and new is false. It's like, what? Why? Config sync. We have core.extension is right here. I don't know why this is throwing a problem. This is probably due to an empty sync directory. I am so confused. Profiles, contrib, simply test, config, sync. There's files there. What are we trying to do? So right now, simply test has a GitHub repo where all the configuration is like a standard Drupal site where it's exported to, /config. And to make contribution a lot easier, I want to follow contenta.js to move it into the the profiles config/sync directory. So that way when we do theming or any changes, config like drush config export nests it inside the Drupal distribution and we install off of it. Since working with Drupal distributions is like the biggest pain because it has like this forked workflow where you work with the site and you work with the distribution. Because config install doesn't sync it, because if you want to do drush config export, it won't work there. And it also doesn't install that configuration on the site. This was added in like Drupal 8.4. So that's one thing. And could there also be other config sync settings in settings.php? I checked that actually when I went to this install in this config install path. So we can even go to install.core.inc. And if we look at, where does it find it? The sync directory. So we'll just go through and we're going to refresh this really quick. So the problem with profile/config install is that it doesn't make it easy to export configuration changes. So we want to manage this as a product. Like no one else is going to install this. We don't want it to just be like a default import and done. We want to make changes and ensure that we can run drush config export. So that way when this deploys to the main website, they're imported like you would your client site. It's just we're doing contributions on Drupal.org. So we need everything bundled in the distribution. No one should have to make a pull request to the GitHub repo except to update the extra dependencies. That's the end goal. And now about the stray settings.php settings options, if we go to config sync directory, see here it cites default file sync. If I step over, it sees that the profile info has config install path, and it changes it to profiles contrib simply test config sync. If I copy the value and I do a ls, you'll see that the files exist. So it's pulling the right directory. It's just having some other quirks. There's times where like the theming needs to change configuration, and now they would add it to config install. They have to write an update hook to deploy it, but that's not exactly necessary for Simply Test Me, which is a distribution that's running as like a product and a service. So this is the area that's getting kind of funky, where it's returning null, or it's returning false. So data, this storage read. So we're in the storage, this file storage. And then again is looking at the wrong directory. It's looking at its default file sync. So I guess core must have a ddev. So that's interesting. I thought core overrode this. Like if you had this set, it just automatically skipped it. So let's just fix this the easy way, where that's one way you could do it, but core just makes it like, so you could do drush cex and give that path, but then you're just fighting availability that's already in core. Like core, you would have to then do drush cim path destination, where core just provides it. We unset the value here as we use the big sync in, or actually let's change that. I know in my pull request I changed something. Well, no, I don't have to document it. I can actually fix it. I mean, everything requires documentation in the end. But I have a way that we can fix. Like this we can fix quickly. So in all.settings, right, here's the fix. So I changed it to ... That's not it. What I do now is I shouldn't have just deleted it. I copied that path and pasted it here. So now, yay, we have it. I bet if we went back to Contenta, I probably missed in their composer project template where, so let's go to Contenta. Let's go to the project template. Okay, I don't know how they have this set up. Maybe it just automatically got configured, but I bet now if I go refresh this, this is easier. So this works around that, the ddev settings thing, or Lando, because we do have a pull request to add Lando, and Lando does have integrated support with Amazy Lagoon. So this should work around however anybody's running this. So let's do a refresh. So you were right about checking all of my settings.php files. I removed it, but then ddev added it. So shame on me for my assumptions. So new extensions, modules, great. Here we go. Another error. Unable to install simply test module since it does not exist. Okay. Let's see why that error is happening. I'm just going to refresh it with xdebug off. So let's go to the core.extensions. Is it because it's listed here? Let's delete that. That might be like a legacy thing too. I think profiles used to be listed as a module and then it was removed. Great. Importing configuration. We'll let this run. Well, if I deleted it, then nothing would install. If I deleted core.extensions, then absolutely nothing would install and we'd have a completely blank site. So yeah, so now this is going to be pokey. Yeah, so before you would document it in the info.yaml. So normally, like we had that here. So we documented it in here. But once you specify config install as true, none of that's necessary because it actually doesn't even read it. Like if you look at install.core.includes, in here somewhere, it will ignore all of those settings and just read from the configuration. So if we did config install path, so if I read this again, somewhere, so if not empty config install path, you'll see it unsets the task of download translation. It unsets the profile modules, profile themes. So your typical info.yaml definitions of the themes, modules, and whatever to install get ignored because it just installs from batch and then downloads translations after and reverts your configuration install. I cannot remember when this was added to core, but it's super amazing. And it's honestly how I run every single one of my projects, is this way. That's going to take a day and a half. I'm going to stop that and do ddev xdebug off. And I'll run it on the command line, which is much faster. It's funny, like when I was first doing Drupal development, when I first started doing Drupal development, I always used the UI, and then I got a job at building a web hosting platform on Drupal with Panoply, and we overrode Panoply, and I was using the UI for the installer, and it took 20 minutes. The thing took 20 minutes to install. Like I just sat there, like. Then I found out about Drush, and I started using Drush site install, which only took 4 minutes. So it definitely makes a difference on running it on the command line. The question is, do you skip the error where the config didn't originate from your site this way? Yes, it skips that error. Like it consumes that as the site ID from there on out. Cool. So I have the ddev command spit out the ULI. So I'll copy that. Let's go visit the site. Make it conflicts with user ID 1. Right now the install just appends the administrator role to it. So it doesn't actually add it here. It just appends that role. So we just logged in. If I visit the home page, we should see our theme, and ta-da, magic. I'm going to push this up. I think this will severely improve our contributor experience, and hopefully y'all learned something new here with that. One thing I can show you, let me open it in a new tab quick off to the side. So sorry, this is a bit of a side quest and not part of the main thing. So when I'm building a product called Brewed Up, which is like a coffee thing. And this is how I actually run all of my Drupal sites is I have the profile, but then I have the Drupal site, but I also have a profile, and I set up the config install. The config install path is the main config. So this way in all of my CI environments, I can run drush CI and just have it install. It's just like my main thing, like in early development, I do test driven development. So I reinstall my site probably like 6 times a day while I'm working on it. And this just ensures that I can export config, reinstall, not get the site doesn't match error. So I've been leveraging this for a long time. Or if you do profile development, use this. That this leads to a whole discussion of like, what do distributions and profiles look like in Drupal? They look like this, in my opinion, where it's a composer template with just that info.yaml. So they don't even need to be in their current directory. But that's a whole other thing. So DrupalCon's this week. If you want to connect in a BOF to talk about this, I'd love to. Honestly, the question about content changes, I don't track content changes because that's in the database. The main thing I focus on is the code and config. Yeah, I don't really. I've avoided like trying to track content changes. There's a handful of modules that let you provide default configuration. I just kind of stayed away from all of that. All right, so I'm gonna get this pushed up to this branch. So let's see. I'm gonna do my get status quick. We'll do a get add there. Do a diff. Let's add the. So I really wanted to get to I really wanted to get to some refactoring today of the front end code and some of the back end code. But to get there, I felt like I needed to tackle some of this like hanging debt. The code needs refactoring, which is technical debt, but there's just all this other like project debt that I feel like we needed to address. Git commit, move config into the distro, not destroy. That just will make contribution easier. I guess one thing we should do is add a readme. Because now that we are getting closer to a launch, we are able to like have more concise bugs that people can fix. And like I said, we have QED42 working on the theming. So if they have any configuration changes, they're not blocked by having to do them here, write an update hook, and then update the GitHub. It's just all right here. And that also makes it a lot easier for us to deploy changes. This GitHub repo is just a shell. Like this GitHub repo will exist purely for the .json and the .lock file. Nothing else will really matter. There's the Lagoon config, but all that really will need to this matters about is the composer.json and composer.lock. We can rename this not to simply development environment, just simply test website. This repo started as my local development environment for contributing to the new version of Simply Test. So we've got a bunch of things that we need to update. So let's just create a basic one, and we'll call it managing configuration. The Simply Test project leverages Drupal's ability to import and to have a site's configuration live within the distribution when making configuration changes. Be sure to run drush config export to export config to the config sync directory. There, that's good enough. Doesn't need to be perfect. Somebody can use the GitLab IDE to expand on it without actually having to clone it locally. So if you're good with words and you're good with documentation, I would love some contribution there. Add basic readme. So now if I do a git push, we will now see this here. and I'm going to get it to review. And one thing I'm going to do, so I don't plan on reinstalling in a while, is so when I brought up the one issue for being able to import like one project at a time, this is the current way things are imported. You check the types. That's not good. So I got another bug I'm going to work on before I tie this live stream off in a little bit. So we need to fix this bug. I don't know what I did to break this, but I broke something. Inserting projects can fail on release data. Right, that was on the release data. Yep, on simply test project versions. We'll just clean this up. It's simply test versions dot date cannot be null. All right, bug report. When importing projects, there is occasionally this error. And I think we all know it's Drupal core. Well, not we all know, I know. It's Drupal core because that's what happened before when I tried to run it. I think it's when importing Drupal core. And it's been all my development, it's been a while since I had to like re-import projects. So we need to expand the tests. So I'm going to create an issue fork and get that checked out locally. The good news is I don't have to worry about reinstalling my site because it's just configuration moved to different places. So let's figure out ddev xdebug. Let's turn on xdebug. And this crashed at project version manager update data. What I think needs to happen is this is actually called in project insert. I think we just need to skip it if project type get type is equal to somewhere these types have like names. And they're not the standard names either. So I have to look at controller. Nope, project fetcher. Type. Projects get type term. Let's look at this here. Self core. So basically, if it's core, we want to skip this. I'm guessing. So if project type is not equal to project types core, so let's drop a breakpoint there and see if that's actually what I'm going to do real quick is verify that's the problem. Could do this with testing, but I want to try to just make it quick. So project, let's look at fields, type. Let's go down the value objects, Drupal core. Yep. And it failed. So if we go and say is not equal to Drupal core, we can run. I realize I think we got a problem though if you want to try to run against Drupal core. So this is running. the problem here is that I think I broke Drupal core support with all of this, which is not great. Let's look at the values. Yeah, module. Let's just pop off of that. So I think I broke Drupal core testing support, but this fixes the crash, so we can resolve that. Do not fetch project version data if Drupal core. Let's do a git push, because that's part of the bug. Like this here, this service is meant to fetch version data for not Drupal core. I don't know. So if we say Drupal current, I guess it returns the data, so maybe it could work here. Oh, invalid date time. All right, there's just all kinds of random bugs that are creeping into here. So file, let's look here. Invalid date time. So short name is file, version, tag, date, status, core compatibility. Invalid date time. We have, I guess I can test this. I was only testing with a few modules, so we can try running a PHP unit test to catch some of these errors. But let me look at the backtrace a bit. So update data file. So version manager, update data, line 12. Oh, sorry, line 12 is when this was invoked. Line 58 was when the merge. Okay, line 58. So status date, release date. Are we somehow getting different values? Obsolete date is a timestamp. What does it show in our fixtures for path auto? Date is a string too. Invalid date time format. I'm going to copy this test and we're going to give it a. Oh, wait, this has it says it has an error. Let's run it. That's weird. Why is it failing? So that passed. Let's try it with that file module though and see if we can figure out. Thanks for tuning in. And profile development's always been like my entire Drupal career has been profile development, a hosting platform, Commerce Kickstart. Every project has always centered around like an install profile. So let's see what's going on with this file project. So I'm really confused as to why this is erroring. So it passed here. The only thing I can think is looking at this. Thanks. So when looking at this, the only thing I can think of is like the status is empty. Which should be true or false, so that's why it's empty. The date is the same here. Path auto has a timestamp. And inside the current, it has a timestamp as well. I have no idea why that could be happening. Let's do a try. Catch. Yeah, it's doing something really silly. So I want to just refresh this. I've got xdebug running. The exception. Oh, great. It threw it right away. For column DB stat. Oh yeah. So incorrect integer value. Ah, you're right. You're right. There, it actually gave a better error there. So we need to do. We can't send boolean because PHP is being, all kinds of fun. We need to do int. We need to cast it to an integer. We need to cast a boolean to an integer, so that way man, I just completely broke everything here. We need to cast this to a integer since it expects a boolean. Operands have incompatible types. Oh, because it's turning static to an integer. There we go. So parentheses matter. So basically, we want to compare if the release status is equal to published, then wrap it in the parentheses and convert that to an integer. And let's just kick this off again. It's also a conversion on the status when there is an unpublished release. All right, let's save. Cool. So now this is running. I'm going to turn off the listener so that way it's a little bit faster. Xdebug 3 is a lot better on its performance when you have it running. So if you turn off anything that's listening for its connections. So I'm going to push this up, get diff. Oh, wait. So the interesting thing is the test passed locally. I'm going to revert that. And I wonder if that's because in my local, I'm using SQLite. I wonder if SQLite was converting the null value to 0. But when you use MySQL or MariaDB, that's when it errors out. So that's why it is important to test across different databases. I like to just be a cheater and use my local development environment, but here it bit me. If we had distribution testing on drupal.org, we would have found that error a long time ago, possibly. So that's something new to consider. All right, to get status, get diff, ensure release dot status is an integer. So do get push. Oh, great. Incorrect integer value again. And this one had an empty date. This is just a fun. I'm going to retitle this to Fix random crashes while importing project versions. This is what I get for running it with just tests and not trying to do the whole thing over. So that's an important lesson. I do test-driven development, but it is not the end-all be-all because it doesn't cover all of your end usages. I tested happy paths with the path auto module and decoupled router, and I'm missing some of these weird edge cases where the media module doesn't have a release date for something for its 7.x branch. So that's I don't even know how we handle that. This isn't formatted. So let's do a, we should write this as a test is what we should do. So cd modules, projects, test, fixtures. Close that. Go to release history and I have a 7.x. Let's do curl o media XML. And let's see if we can parse this. So it's the beta 2 release. Wild. It has no date. And it has no files. So I'm guessing, I wonder if maybe we just got to exclude these because this thing is just not right, period. Let's look at it. Skip beta 2 and upgrade to beta 3 as newer or newer as soon as possible. So, all right, we're just going to add something to skip that if there's no date. That's really weird. That is in the XML. So if release, we'll just, I like to be strict with my checking, but we're going to say if empty release date continue. That's super weird. Especially because it's still published, like it didn't get unpublished. So let's find the test project. I didn't write a complete kernel test for it, but we're going to say test version no crash on empty date. I should have a test that's just for the project version manager, but we have this here and I want to make sure we capture this. Shoot, I'm pretty sure Dave Reed manages that. This isn't going through the test fixture history actually, so where am I using these fixtures? It's just parsing it. Or I guess, yeah, we don't need the fixture. Sorry, we don't need the fixture because we want to just download it from let's just run it. We want it to actually download from drupal.org. The one problem with these kernel tests is it actually downloads release history live from drupal.org. Filled, asserting that an array is not empty because we had an error. It doesn't exactly bubble up that error. Oh. But we still had something go wrong. Why didn't it cause a crash? Because it should have had. All right, we're going to put this back into a try catch to see what the error is, hopefully inside of our test. I'm going to listen for any global error. we're going to rethrow it at the end of it, and we'll stop there. So in order to perform your xdebug and your kernel test, one of the easiest ways is to turn off running in a separate process. Your tests will fail if this isn't turned on because Drupal modifies the global state. And with that on, it runs all the tests in processes, so that way the global state doesn't get polluted. But it also makes it near impossible to test unless you have xdebug running across the board. So I'm going to do, yep, I've got my breakpoint there. I'm going to run debug here and see if we can figure out where else this is crashing. Because it's obviously not just an empty date field, because that's one reason it was crashing, but there's another one, and the test didn't show the error, and I don't know why. It's crashing elsewhere visibly. So again, what we're testing here is that on project insert, it's fetching the releases, and something is causing it to crash. One reason is an empty date. Now to see what else it could be. So it's running and we're not getting any exceptions. So hopefully we'll find something out. Let's look at this merge request just to verify what we've gone through so far. Come on. So yeah, so there's that issue. It seemed like there's an issue when fetching core, but maybe that was just a false flag to this or these other issues as well. And we're getting nothing. So I'm going to stop the test. I'm going to get out of this. Actually, no, I'm going to keep this try catch to breakpoint on. And it's going to remove this test since it's not helping us out right now. And we're going to refresh this batch and see if that can help us. It's just so date on date is empty, but why else is this crashing? I mean, I guess we could just say try catch and just log an error and continue, which I feel like is how a lot of code handles things, but I don't like doing that. I like to know why things are breaking up front instead of just well, we logged an error and eventually we'll fix it. Because how many times have we done that? I know I'm on projects like that where we logged it something went wrong, so we'll log the error, and then you've got lines and lines and lines and lines and lines of those errors, and you just never really get time to fixing them. Because it doesn't get funded, or there's just other things happening. Just stuff happens. This seems to be processed. So maybe we are in the clear. So let's see. I want to look at that import form real quick. Import, what does it do? Form, import form. Submit. So yeah, it adds Drupal immediately and gets the core data. And then fetches its releases. So does that mean I'm going to look at our database. I wonder if having that core versions table is actually duplicating some content with the core releases, which I think is okay. What files got externally added? it was that XML file. I'm going to close that. So if we go to project versions, let's do where they updated this, and I'm not a fan with how order by is the largest part. First short name equals Drupal. No, okay, so that didn't get added because it's not tracked as a project. So that's, but it should be based on import form. This core data, short name is Drupal. That's in the because it's not in the versions, but it is the project. Okay. It's not crashing, so I'm happy with that. I am going to take all this back out of this try catch. Sometimes I leave code like that so I can just quick go back and debug problem areas, but again, it just adds noise. So why don't we, is there a way to list the projects? I don't think so. I'm going to quit that. And before we head out, I want to try running against Drupal core with that fix in place. We'll delete Drupal core and okay, the cache entity tables gone. Project versions, we have that set. Let's go back to the importer. Import modules. It automatically assumes Drupal core, but just to make sure, we're going to step through this. And we've got that here. And we'll go to this part. And let's see, because if I can hopefully fix the fact that I broke Drupal core support with this right here, I'll be happy. Oh, it just kept importing. So I guess it didn't try to re-add. Nope. Here, where is this? What is this? Values, type, B Drupal core. No, it's not. Weird. Search from projects, simple test project, P, sandbox, title. I feel like there might be some problems here because there's a lot of Drupal in there. So the easiest way is to just right click and do, there's a truncate. I don't want to drop it. Just delete those. There's a way in here, SQL scripts, database tools, truncate. There we go. We want to truncate these tables. We've got, oh, there's no core. Ah, that's right. There's no core versions after I reinstalled. But let's go back into simply test projects import. Click on modules. Okay, so we're saving core. We're inserting releases. So somewhere this was breaking. So data published. If empty release date. but it's not. Hold on, I'm really confused. Because it showed that there was data in there, and it's a magical getter into the data property. Okay, so the transaction was aborted, so that way it didn't actually save the project. Project save. Okay, we can skip that. I wish I would have done like a fresh install when I was working on this before to catch all these bugs earlier on, but it is what it is. So test. Oh, shoot. Because this empty check doesn't dive into the getter, so this actually would break everything. Is there a magical set wake up invoke destruct is set to string? So we can't do an empty check there because the property is actually empty. It doesn't work on magical getters. So I guess what we could do is I guess we're gonna take a cheater way. We're gonna do to do. Sometimes the date is empty. No, I don't like that. We'll do the release date. Or I guess we'll save. So we're gonna take the Drupal approach where you save raw and filter on. We'll do the whole. Drupal likes to save raw and filter on output, and that's the approach we'll take. Note we had some releases like media 7.x, digital beta 2, which were pulled and which had a bad release and no date. Instead of skipping, we'll set an empty value. Yeah, we'll take that approach, and let's see if I can get core to import without erroring, because maybe there was like a core release that had that same issue. Or there's gonna be more to it. So hopefully we're good. See, I wrote to do needs test. If I just would have wrote my test in the first place, I wouldn't be in this mess. So while that's running, I'm just going to do a quick look at the issues to see what needs to be merged. New comment here. Cool. Adam credited people. We need to get making a list. We need to get that one merged and this merged and that merged. All right, so we've got this importing. Let's look at our database tables. Okay, we've got Drupal core. We've got tons of stuff. Let's see if we've got Drupal core releases in here. Yep, we do. All right, so it's kind of comical because we track Drupal core releases in this other table. So I think all of that needs to be revisited. honestly, like it's in its own fun roundabout way. This all started with just checking a Drupal core thing. Oh, jeez, you gotta be kidding. This still errored out. Well, it's for 3.x, 3.0, beta 2. Man, you gotta be kidding me. First off, we don't need this check after all. Drupal core imports just fine. There's no changes needed here. Project manager. Incorrect integer value for db.date. Is it because it's coming back as an empty string? Well, I guess what I can do here, public function get date. We'll wrap it into this part of it. And we'll say that it has to return an integer. So I didn't make a full value object because I wanted to just avoid some of the hassle with defining all the things. But this is coming up with a great reason. Like, it's just not working. So release date equals this date. All right. Remove that from the documentation. We're going to cast it to an integer, as that's what it should be. I moved it out. And if it's null, we'll set it to 0. Real quick, I'm looking at release data, this processor get data, core compatibility. Oh, we are converting everything to strings. That's why. So what we'll do is converting it to an empty string. So we'll just have this be release. So this data date, like we know that we have date as a property. Convert that back. The problem is that date is coming back as an empty string. So if release date is equal to I guess we'll just return that. We'll see if that does it. So if we refresh, hopefully we catch here. No. Post save media. Yeah. We're just going to hold on to that error. This is another reason why I want to just be able to import a single module to debug some of this. So, but I have to get going. I'm already half an hour over my normal time period, so that way I can go do some family stuff. This is just not working. I'm going to mark this as needs work. Need to investigate this more properly. I'm going to remove that method because it doesn't seem to be helping. And remove change here. Undo that change. And I want to bring back the core search. Undo, avoid that thing. Get diff, undo removal of processing core project. I'm going to push that and just have to deal with it. I'm going to close up some tabs and just sort out what needs to be committed. So we've got that one, that, and this, which I believe this one should be fine. But we need to manually test this still. So let's put it at needs. Was it manual testing? There we go. All right, so I think this is a big one, at least for the contributor flow and also our maintenance of the project. This fixes some tests and this fixes a typo I made. So thanks again for tuning in. We're getting close to getting this rolling. I'll be back live streaming on Wednesday at least, where I'll be working to wrap up the Drupal Rector code for the Drupal 10 readiness. I'm blocked on a patch being merged, so if that's not merged, I'll be back on simplytest.me. All right, have a good one, everybody.